Everyone, I thought I would just take a few minutes today, record a short video. I posted a very brief article on my website too. So just go to rhettsmith.com. You can read about it, have some links there. Been thinking a lot about just breathing exercises, breath work practices for people. Um, I wrote in the post. It'd be too much to say, probably, that I've um, been on this quest forever to find the perfect breath practice. But in some ways I have really over the last 10, 11, maybe 12 years. I've tried a lot of different techniques, different practices. I've tried different apps, was doing Headspace for many years. I will, on occasion, still practice Headspace, find it to be super helpful. So I've been using that one off and on probably for, I don't know, 12 years or so. A lot of people use Calm. I like using Calm. A lot of people of faith, especially evangelical Christian faith, use the Abide app. They like the biblical meditations, breath practice. There's one called Breath Work, just spelled breath and then WRK, which I've have found helpful and experimented with. So there's a lot of things. And then, outside of apps, there's also different techniques you could use. There's the 4-7-8 breathing practice. There's square, or what they call box breathing. But hands down, there's been one, I would call it breathwork pattern, breathwork practice that has influenced me the most in the last, I don't know, probably year at least. And I'm using it every day. And it was brought to my attention by a colleague of mine as we were working on and developing anxiety intensives last year that we launched last year. We were trying to think of what is at least one intervention, one practice related to breath that we can help people practice, not give them a bunch of tools, but one tool. And we came across this thing called the psychological sigh, which is not new. I've seen different dates, probably the early 20th century, 1919, somewhere around there, that it was developed or talked about. But it was mainly brought to my attention because of the work of Andrew Huberman, who many of you may know from his podcast, which is super popular, called the Huberman Lab. He's up at Stanford University, runs a lab there. He is a neurobiologist and ophthalmologist there, neuroscientist, essentially, that he, I think, is the title that people often refer to him as. But he, last year, maybe it's not the first time, but I came across an article that was brought to my attention where he talks about this thing called the psychological sigh and this breath practice. And he talks about why he thinks this breath practice is the most important and critical, especially in helping anxiety. He explains a lot better than I can. So that's why I recommend you watch his video at my link at my website, rhettsmith.com. Just look under the content page, or just Google Andrew Huberman, psychological sigh, and you'll see all kinds of stuff come up. There's one video I watch a lot. It's about 4 minutes long. It takes place with his interview in the Tim Ferriss podcast where he talks about it. But essentially, let me just tell you what it is real quick, and I'll show it to you. But in the psychological sigh, what you do is you breathe in through your nose, inhale, right? You hold, and then you exhale. Now, that's not much different than other practices. What's different about this one is it's a double inhale. So you breathe in twice. And he talks a lot about the double inhale will both inflate both chest and diaphragm. And I don't know if you ever notice when you're anxious, a lot or on occasion, but I think it's a lot. When we're anxious a lot, we notice that we're just not breathing fully in our chest. It's like a shallow breath, or we're almost holding our breath. Sometimes I'm sitting here in my therapy office right now, and sometimes I'll notice working with clients, I'm just like, I haven't really breathed. I mean, I'm breathing a little bit because I'm alive, but I'm not like fully inhaling. And when we don't inhale, we don't take in the oxygen that we need. We tend to limit oxygen to the brain, which can then create panic. There's a much more sophisticated process that I'm explaining to you, but essentially, as we hold our breath longer and longer, it increases the level of what might be described as emotional dysregulation. We're unable to regulate our emotions very well, and we move into this emotional reactivity. And so when we ground ourselves in breath, there's just a calmness, a regulation that takes, I was going to say regulativity, it's not a word, a regulation that takes place that calms, and we move more into what I would call like a mindful response to a situation versus just a reactivity. So, if you're watching me, it would look something like this. I usually do several reps. I think he recommends something like 3 reps. Um, I often start my day intentionally laying in bed, practicing this, end my day in bed, practicing this. And then I try to practice it throughout the day, just noticing throughout the day when I'm anxious or when I'm holding my breath, just move into that. Sometimes I'll stop at 3 reps. Sometimes I'll go 5. Sometimes I'll go 10. Sometimes I'll go longer. What for me, depending on the situation, the context, I do it enough till I feel my body just settle and the anxiety just leave. Um, and I notice as I practice it, my inhales get longer, my breath hold gets longer, and my breath exhale gets longer. It's just the overall capacity, I guess is the word, to do that is strengthened. The capacity, I think, builds over time through practice. Some things you can do too is put your hand, you can't see, but my hand on my diaphragm, hand on my chest. And just feel the inhale of the diaphragm and of the chest, and then noticing the hold and noticing the exhale. I think tying it in is helpful. One thing Andrew Huberman mentions on different occasions is too that you can make more concrete the practice by attaching some physical movements to it. It's something that we've taught people at anxiety intensives. Is something I practice with people in my office when we're diving into some of this. Not everybody loves it. You may not tie the physical piece to it if you're in public. Like I'm sitting in my chair, you're sitting in school or at work, and you want to practice some breathing techniques. You can do that super easily without drawing attention to yourself, without making a real loud, practice, and everyone's like freaking out in the office. It's a little harder to not draw attention to yourself when you're using movements. But if you feel comfortable using movements or you're alone, you might do something like this, where maybe it's like, or we've practiced before with people, or sometimes whatever you want to do, make it your own. But what I want to encourage you is to stick with one practice. I've often said we need only 1 or 2 tools that we become really great at, experts at, masters at, to really navigate the world, I think, of anxiety, to navigate the world of depression. Obviously there's varying contexts of anxiety and depression and things that you'll need. But I think one tool that is worth mastering and becoming really familiar with is some type of breath work and pattern. And instead of moving from one to one to one to the next, to the next, to the next, stick with one through all its ups and downs. You really don't master something by switching in and out when you don't feel comfortable with it or when you feel like it's not as great as it should be. So find one that's helpful for you, practice it, look for opportunities to practice it intentionally every day, like set aside time just to practice it. And then look for opportunities to just where your awareness brings you to this place where you move into a breath practice. So as I'm moving through my day, I notice I'm anxious or holding my breath, and that's a time to practice this breath work. And for me, what I'm practicing now is the psychological sigh, as proposed by Dr. Huberman. Again, if you want to see him practice it and talk about it, just Google his name, Dr. Andrew Huberman, Huberman, psychological sigh. You'll see lots of videos pop up, articles. If you go to my website, just rhettsmith.com, and hitting the search button there, Andrew Huberman or psychological sigh, or just put it in the Google search, Rhett Smith, psychological sigh, it'll pop up, and you can see me practicing it here in this video. And I would encourage you to stick with it and just see what you notice over time as you build this habit, how it helps you navigate your anxiety, helps you move from a more calmful emotional regulation to where you can mindfully choose how to respond to situations versus just anxiously reacting to situations. So let me demonstrate it one more time, and then we'll be done. So 2 inhales, a hold, exhale. That's it. It's not magic. One opportunity of it, one practice of it's not going to, I don't think, change your life or move the needle, but do this consistent over time, and I think you'll notice a drastic difference um, in your capacity to regulate your emotions, navigate anxiety, and other mental health issues that start to come your way. It's a beautiful tool to have in your toolkit. Hope that's helpful, and I'll talk to all of you later.